Hi, hello, what's up? Welcome to Tax Ladder again. We're going to look at a series of revision lectures in indirect tax for the June 2020 attempt. We're going to go priority basis based on the weightage of marks. We'll first cover the chapters which have a lot of weightage. In that way, even after listening to a few lectures, we'll be able to cover a chunk of the portion now. So let us start today. In the first lesson, we're going to learn a series of subjects including the extent and applicability of the GST law. We'll also look at the chargeability section. We'll look at what an intra and interstate supply is. We'll top it off with the RCM applicable on services. Let us start. If you look at the slide in front, my name is Sivakant. I'm a chartered accountant. I'm a certified GST practitioner. I've finished my GST certification course of the ICAI. I've also done my course at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Delhi on import exports. So I'll be better able to explain you from a practical point of view. Let us start. Extent and commencement. The GST law extends to the whole of India, including Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, it does. So the SGST law applies to the states to which the law applies to. Let us say Telangana's SGST law applies to the state of Telangana. The UTGST law of Chandigarh applies to the Union Territory of Chandigarh. Now, state, as per the GST law, includes union territories with legislation. What are examples of that? New Delhi is a union territory, but it has its own assembly. Assembly is nothing but a legislature. So, New Delhi should not be treated as a union territory, but it should be treated as a state for GST purpose. Now, what is India? India is defined under 2 subsection 56 of the CGST Act 2017. The territory of India is referred to in Article 1. Article 1 says that India is a combination of all the states and union territories. India includes all the states and union territories. That landmass is the territory of India. All clubbed together would be given under Article 1 if you look at Article 1. Now, it also includes the territorial waters, the seabed, subsoil underlying such territorial waters, the continental shelf, exclusive economic zone, and maritime zone. What does this mean? India includes territorial waters. Let us look at this diagram. It includes the territorial waters. If you go to a sea, if you go to a beach, from somewhere water will start. From that baseline, that exactly is not the baseline. There is a clearly demarcated baseline by each state. That depends on the state to state. But for convenience purpose, let us say where the water begins from. From that point onwards, till 12 nautical miles, it is the territorial waters. And from the baseline to 200 nautical miles is the exclusive economic zone. And what is the continental shelf? The continental shelf is also extending, it is similar to exclusive economic zone. It also extends to 200 nautical miles. But the only difference between EEZ and continental shelf is continental shelf only is restricted to the soil and the seabed. The seabed and soil underlying the seabed is the continental shelf. Continental shelf does not include the water. Understand, that is the difference between an exclusive economic zone and a continental shelf. Exclusive economic zone, in this zone, the country of India has exclusive economic rights over whatever is inside this water, be it petroleum, be it a lot of minerals and precious metals, whatever is included in this territorial waters of the EEZ, India has exclusive rights, exclusive economic rights. That is why it is called an exclusive economic zone. Understood? And after this EEZ, it is high seas, which belongs to all the countries. All the countries have equal rights on the high seas. Now, territorial waters, now look up what is upside of the territorial waters, the airspace above the territorial waters and the territory of India. We have to consider what is up also. So, the airspace above the territory and territorial waters is also India. Then look down. The subsoil and seabed underlying the territorial waters is also covered under the definition of India. Now, let us go to the definition again. India is the territory of India referred to in Article 1. Territorial waters, the seabed, subsoil underlying the territorial waters, continental shelf, exclusive economic zone, any other maritime zone. airspace above the territory and territorial waters. To ultimately conclude, India is the states and union territories put together, the territorial waters exclusive economic zone, what is up, and what is down. Look at what is down, the subsoil and seabed underlying the territorial waters and the exclusive economic zone. And what else? The airspace above the territory and territorial waters. So these are the three things that covers India. This whatever commercial activity, let us say I sell on a ship which is on the territorial waters. So if I do not extend this act to territorial waters, that will not be coming under the GST net. So in order to avoid that, I have to include that. Even in the earlier service tax regime also, it was pretty much the same definition. So this is the diagram. Now let us look at what is interstate supplies under section 7 of the IGST Act. Simply put it, interstate supply is I am in this state and the recipient is in another state. I am supplying goods to a person in any other state. That is the layman term for it. But from an act's point of view, the location of supplier is in India. The place of supply in case of goods is place where the movement of goods terminates. It is in another state. So this is what an interstate supply is. Look at two things. Where is the location of supplier? Where is the location of place of supply? If these two are in different states, this is an interstate supply. Now let us look at 7.1. Section 7 subsection 1, supply of goods where location of supplier and place of supply are in two different states or union territories shall be treated as supplies in the course of interstate trade or commerce. Simple. 7.2, supply of goods import into the territory of India till they cross the customs frontiers of India. Okay, now there is a need for covering imports also in the interstate supplies. Why is there a need? Is it not being covered under 7.1? Because see, the location of supplier and place of supply is not in two different states or union territories here. It is altogether a different country. So I cannot cover imports under interstate supplies because IGST has to be levied as per the constitutional change itself. If we look at the amendments of the constitution, import is deemed to be an interstate supply. It is a supply in the course of interstate trade or commerce as per the constitution itself. I'm just giving an effect to that in the GST law also. So let us look at 7 subsection 2, supply of goods imported into the territory of India till they cross the customs frontiers of India. That means what is customs frontiers? The place where the customs station, customs airport or the customs land customs station where the goods are ordinarily kept before clearance by customs authorities. So that place, when the goods are imported into that place and kept there, it also includes a warehouse. If the goods are kept at that place before clearance, it is import. It is treated as interstate supply. Supply of section 7 subsection 3. So 1 and 2 talk of goods. 3 and 4 talk of services. Both are separately given, even though there is no differentiation of goods and service as per the introduction of GST, but different sections are given for goods and services for the convenience of the taxpayer in a way. But the wordings are pretty much the same. Supply of services where location of supplier and the place of supply are in two different states. Ditto. 7.1 and 7.3 are pretty much the same. The only change is instead of goods, services. Even 7.2, supply of services imported into the territory of India shall be treated as supply in the course of interstate trade or commerce. Now let us look at section 7 subsection 5. Residual case of supply of goods or services. Supplier located in India, place of supply outside India. So this section 7 subsection 5 covers all the residual cases which could be possible. Let us imagine X is in Telangana, he exports software service to United States, but he is not receiving convertible foreign exchange. He is receiving Indian rupees only. Look at the definition of export of service. One of the conditions to be satisfied is I have to receive the amount in convertible foreign exchange. If that is not happening, it is not export. Then what is it? Is it intrastate supply? No, it is not intrastate supply. The location of supplier is in India, place of supply is outside India, and amount is not being received in foreign convertible foreign exchange, if that also would have taken place, then I would have categorized it as an export of service. But hence this will be covered as interstate supply and IGST would be leviable. Understand? Now supply to a SEZ unit or SEZ developer. Now there is a special economic zone in many parts of states. It has special privileges. It is to encourage foreign currency remittances. So the more foreign currency the country earns, the better it is. It is said to be in a better position. So SEZ is set up to encourage exports. Whatever purchases made by a SEZ unit and whatever sales exports it makes, it gets a lot of incentives. So when a person makes a supply, or if a SEZ unit supplies to a local person, then it is to be treated as interstate supply. Even though the SEZ unit is in Telangana and I am also in Telangana, I am a supplier of certain goods, I am making a supply to a SEZ unit in Gachibowli in Hyderabad. Both are in Telangana, but still, because it is a SEZ unit, it would attract IGST and not CGST, SGST. Understand? Similarly, for a SEZ developer, the SEZ developer, what he does is, let us look at the example of Mahindra SEZ is there. Mahindra IT SEZ. Who is the SEZ developer here? Mahindra. So if Mahindra supplies anything to a person, then it would attract IGST and not CGST, SGST. Now, not being, this is also a residual case, not being an intrastate supply, not covered anywhere else. It is not an intrastate supply, that means it is not a local supply, and it is not covered anywhere else. Example is supply of goods to a tourist. It is specifically excluded from the definition of intrastate supply. Even if I supply to a tourist locally within the state, it is not an intrastate supply. Then what is it? The tourist can claim a refund as per section 15 on goods taken out of the country. So it is when a tourist goes outside India, he can claim a refund of the tax paid on the goods purchased by him, not services. Now that is specifically excluded from intrastate supply. So it has to be some kind of supply, right? It will come here, not being an intrastate supply, not covered anywhere else. It will be an interstate supply as per section 7, subsection 5. Now what is an intrastate supply? Simple, location of supplier in one state, place of supply is also in the same state. It is an intrastate supply as per section 8, subsection 1. Just like section 7, it also differentiates goods and services. For goods it is given under 8 subsection 1. For services it is given under 8 subsection 2. Now supply of goods where location of supplier and place of supply are in the same state or union territory shall be intrastate supply, except the following. Supply of goods to or by a SEZ unit or developer is not an intrastate supply because it is specifically an interstate supply. Supplies to a tourist, if it is not this, then it will come under the residual clause of section 7 subsection 5 of the IGST Act. Similarly, 8 subsection 2, supply of services where location of supplier and place of supply are in the same state except intrastate supply of service to or by a SEZ unit or developer. Now let us look at a distinct person. What is the significance of a distinct person? These are distinct persons. Let us look at some examples. X is a software company in India. It has established any other branch, X Inc. in United States. Now this X Inc. is also said to be an establishment of X in India. These two will be treated separately for GST purposes. These two are separate entities for GST purposes. A person has establishment in India and any other establishment outside India. So both of them will be treated as establishments of distinct persons. Both are establishments of two different people. An establishment in a state and an establishment outside the state. Let us say Reliance Industries has registrations in multiple states. So each establishment in each state shall be treated as establishments of different persons. Establishment in two states is, what are the examples? Let us say Bata has a leather factory, it has a retail shop. It obtains two registrations, one for its factory on the outskirts of Hyderabad and for the retail shop. Both will be treated as establishments of distinct persons. Both will be given separate GST registration. The person carrying on a business through branch or agency or representational office in any territory shall be treated as having an establishment in that territory. Now, what does this mean? I have an agent who represents me in the state of Kolkata. That is said to be an agency there. He sells goods on my behalf, or he markets me there. He provides services on my behalf there in my name as a principal. In that case, he would be treated as a distinct person. He is given full rights to do whatever he wants. He can raise a bill on his own name. In that case, he will be treated as a distinct person. He has to, if I make a supply to him, then I have to raise a GST invoice on him. So that is what an agency or a branch or a representation office. If I just have a representation office which can raise an invoice in its own name, then even in that case, office will be said to be a distinct person. Now let us look at a very interesting case in respect of a SEZ unit or a developer. Just read this. Services of short-term accommodation conferencing will be treated as interstate supply as section 7 subsection 5 clause B will prevail over 12 subsection 3 clause C. Let us look at this example. X has a hotel in Hyderabad. The IT SEZ park is there. A very important person is coming from United States and he belongs to, let us say, United Technologies is in a SEZ unit. Now the boss from United States is coming to stay here. Now what it does is it books a hotel in Hotel Marriott and all the expenses of the hotel are borne by United Technologies. Now this Marriott raises a bill on the SEZ unit. It is a supply of service to a SEZ unit. As per section 7 subsection 5, it is an interstate supply, right? Clause B, it will be an interstate supply. But let us look at it from where, what is the location of supplier? Location of supplier of service is India, in the state of Telangana in India. What is the place of supply? The place of supply in case of restaurant, hotel accommodation services, the location of immovable property. It is Telangana. Both are in the same state, so it has to be an intrastate supply as per that logic. But as per the rules of interpretation, the preceding section will prevail over the later section. So section 7 subsection 5 clause B will prevail over 12 subsection 3 clause C, and moreover the most specific provision will prevail over the general one. Section 7 subsection 5 clause B is more specific to a SEZ unit. If you look at 7 subsection 5B, supply to or by, it specifically says supply to a SEZ unit or a SEZ developer or supply by a SEZ unit or developer is an interstate supply. It is more specific in nature. Whereas if you look at it from 12 subsection 3 clause C point of view, it just specifies the place of supply. It is more general in nature. So the more specific provision will prevail over the general one. See, this is what. Now let us come to section 9 of the IGST Act. In the example that we've looked at, let us say where the supply is in territorial waters, location of supplier and place of supply in territorial waters, the location of supplier and place of supply shall be in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of the appropriate baseline NPA is located. Okay, what does this mean? It just means that, let us say I'm making a sale in a boat in the shore of Tamil Nadu. Now what is the place of supply? The place of supply is in the territorial waters because movement of goods terminates in the territorial waters. The place of supply is territorial waters. How can I? It has to be one state or union territory, otherwise no SGST can come. So I have to choose one state or union territory. So that is why it says that where the place of supply or location of supplier is in the territorial waters, then such place of supply or location of supplier shall be the coastal state. What is the coastal state? Tamil Nadu. nearest point of the appropriate baseline is located. Where is the nearest point of the appropriate baseline for this supply? For these territorial waters, the nearest point of the baseline is the beach of Tamil Nadu. Now, the coastal state in respect of the nearest point of the appropriate baseline is Tamil Nadu. So, the place of supply or location of supplier shall be the state of Tamil Nadu. This is what section 9 is. Just remember NPA, nearest point of appropriate baseline. If any question asks you this, it will be easy for you to remember. NPA, nearest point of the appropriate baseline. If anyone says place of supply in territorial waters, remember NPA, nearest point of appropriate baseline. And put it together, the coastal state where the nearest point of the appropriate baseline is located. It will be the place of supply or location of supplier. And now let us look at chargeability section, which is very important. Now, nowhere have we seen that if I do this event, tax will be chargeable. Nowhere have we read. Now, there is a need, because that is what the taxable event is. That is the chargeability section. Chargeability section for CGST is given by section 9, and for IGST it is given by section 5. Look at section 9 subsection 1. GST shall be levied on all intrastate supplies other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption on value determined under section 15 at such rates not exceeding 20%. That means GST shall be levied on all intrastate supplies other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Alcohol has not been brought into the GST net yet. Now, what is the need for, then what about interstate supply? It is ditto. Put 5 instead of 9 and it will read as follows: GST shall be levied on all interstate supplies other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption. So, the maximum rate of GST shall not exceed 40% in total, effectively. CGST 20%, SGST 20%, totally it should not exceed 40% in any case whatsoever. It is the reason why states have accepted for the introduction of GST. Section 9.1 and section 5.1 is the chargeability section. Now, what about import of goods? Import of goods is an interstate supply because it is clearly covered under the definition of interstate supply. So, if it is an interstate supply, it is chargeable to GST. Now, the question arises as per what value and what are the provisions for determination of value. So, there has to be some redirection to the Customs Act. So, this is what redirects it to the Customs Tariff Act and the Customs Act. Let us read this. Integrated tax on goods imported into India shall be levied and collected in accordance with the provisions of section 3 of the Customs Tariff Act. Section 3 subsection 7 says that IGST shall be levied at the rate applicable on similar goods on their supply in India. 3.7 says if I am importing coffee beans, what is the rate of coffee beans of the same type if they are sold in India? That rate is applicable on the imported coffee beans. So that is what section 3 subsection 7 says. Now section 3 subsection 8 gives us what is the value applicable. Section 3 subsection 8 says that the value will be the value as per section 14.1 and section 14.2 of the Customs Act. 14.1 tells us the value for determination of customs duty is the transaction value. Similarly, for levy of IGST also, it is the transaction value plus the customs duty, because on transaction value customs duty is levied, on transaction value plus customs duty IGST is levied. That is what section 3.8 says. Now, what is at the point where duties of customs? Now, when should I levy IGST? Then it says, look at section 12 of the Customs Act. Section 12 says that customs duty shall be levied at the time when goods are imported into India. So, at the same time, IGST will also be levied. When customs duty is levied, IGST is also levied. So, to sum this up, IGST is levied as per the GST law, but the collection and the provisions that are applicable are Customs Tariff Act and the Customs Act. But officially the name is IGST, but the levy and collection is as per the provisions of the Customs Tariff Act 1975, 37 and 38, and the Customs Act section 12 and also section 14, which gives us the valuation. Now understood. Now let us look at 9 subsection 2. Petrol, high speed diesel, motor spirit, natural gas, aviation turbine fuel shall be levied with effect from such date as may be notified by the government. Now petrol, high speed diesel, natural gas, aviation turbine fuel, motor spirit, all of these have not been brought into the GST net. They will be brought from a date notified by the government as per the recommendations of the GST Council. Understood. Now next, section 9 subsection 3. Government may by notification specify the categories of goods and services, the tax on which shall be paid on reverse charge by the recipient of goods or services. All the provisions shall apply as if he is the person liable to pay tax. Understood. Now this is giving power to the central government. By way of notification, it can notify certain services, telling that the person liable to pay tax will be the recipient of the service. Normally what happens under forward charge, the supplier of service collects tax and pays it to the government. The person liable to pay tax is the supplier of service. In certain specified services, the person liable to pay is the recipient of service. What are those services? We'll look at this now. These are the services notified under reverse charge. Let us look at each of them in brief. Goods Transport Agency services by way of transport of goods by road provided to a factory governed by the Factories Act, society registered under the Societies Registration Act, any cooperative society established under any law for the time being in force, any registered person, a body corporate, any partnership firm, whether registered, the deed of partnership could be registered or not, we don't care, a casual taxable person. All of these people, if I provide a service to, if the GTA provides a service to by issuing a consignment note, in that case the person liable to pay tax is the recipient of service. The recipient for this purpose will be the person liable to pay freight. Let us say X delivers goods to Y. The person responsible to pay freight is the transportation charges, could be X or Y. Even if X is the person liable to pay freight, then he will be the recipient of service. You have to look at, first question you have to ask is, who is the responsible to pay freight? If it is the supplier, then he is the recipient of transport service. If it is the recipient of goods, then he will be the recipient of transport service. Based on that, we have to make the decision. And next, who is the recipient? Is he falling under this category? Is it a body corporate? Then who is exempted from applicability of this RCM? If he is an individual who is not registered at all, then he doesn't need to pay GST under RCM. If he is registered, then he would be covered under this D clause. Then any other society, cooperative society, factory, body corporate, partnership firm, whether registered or not, including an association of persons, would be required to pay tax under RCM. One more condition is, the GTA transport operator should have opted for the 5% output tax without ITC. If he opted for 12% with ITC, then the GTA operator himself is required to pay tax under forward charge. Now recipient in this case would be the person who is liable to pay freight. We've already discussed. Supply to a department of central government, state government, union territory, local authority, government agencies who have taken registration only for deduction under section 51. See, these tribal departments and a lot of government departments are there who really don't need to register themselves under GST because the outward supplies are exempt. But because, let us say, some manpower services are providing service to the tribal departments, they collect GST from the tribal department and they don't pay to the government. There's a loophole there. In order to avoid this loophole, they have brought in a thing called TDS. So these government departments, while making payment to the suppliers of service, they have to deduct tax and pay them. So if they've registered only for the purpose of deducting TDS as a TDS deductor, then RCM is not applicable even though the tribal department obtains GTA service. They don't need to pay tax under RCM. The GTA operator himself has to pay, even though he has opted for 5% without ITC, he has to collect tax and he has to pay himself, not the government department. Understand? Now let us look at, and one more thing is, the government department, there's no need to have two audit trails, right? RCM basically is for keeping an audit trail. There is to see that there's no person who is evading tax. RCM is one way, because here anyway TDS is being deducted. Why is there a necessity for RCM? That is one more thing. Second one, supply of legal service by way of individual advocate, senior advocate, firm of advocates to any business entity located in the taxable territory. So legal services, remember, only if it is in relation to any branch of law, advisory, consultancy, representation, any branch of law by an individual advocate, firm of advocate, including a senior advocate, to any business entity, then the person liable to pay tax is the business entity. However, legal services provided to a business entity which is not required to register itself under GST is exempt. It is given under the exemption notification. So if you read both of them combinedly, the business entity is required to pay tax under RCM only if it is registered. If it is required to get registered, if it requires to get itself registered and it has not registered itself, then still this RCM would be applicable. Let us look at this. Business entity would be the litigant, applicant or petitioner. A court case is filed against the business entity, then the business entity responds, then the business entity is the respondent, if or the litigant. If the business entity itself is filing the case, then it will be the petitioner. However, exemption would be applicable to the extent turnover of the business entity is within the threshold limit for mandatory registration. The threshold limit is still 20 lakhs. However, there is a composition scheme that has been prescribed for service providers. We look at this in a later lesson. Now, supply of services by an arbitral tribunal. Arbitral tribunal to any business entity located in taxable territory, it is the same. Arbitral tribunals, there are a lot of arbitral tribunal to amicably resolve legal disputes by trying to avoid court and easy settlement of disputes. So if the arbitral tribunal provides service to, let us say, Reliance, if you purchase any Reliance goods, it might be there in the invoice that all the disputes are subject to arbitral tribunal, and later and if not, then further proceedings will be initiated. So the initial settlement will happen in the arbitral tribunal. I will go further and say that once it is settled in the arbitral tribunal, most of the Supreme Courts also don't accept, because arbitration is said to be the final judgment. Even a Supreme Court does not have the power to accept any further going against the ruling of the arbitral tribunal. So the arbitral tribunal charges something from the Reliance Industries or persons involved in the dispute. So that fees, the person liable to pay tax would be Reliance Industries or the big companies involved in the dispute, and not the arbitral tribunal itself. Arbitral tribunal will have its own legal constitution. It could be an AOP, it could be a BOI, but the person liable to pay tax would be the business entity, provided if the business entity is not required to register itself, it is a small business entity, then the person liable to pay tax and collect is the arbitral tribunal itself. Sponsorship service by a person to a body corporate or a partnership firm. Now, let us say IPL is there, pretty simple. Who is providing? The BCCI is providing service, sponsorship service. It is displaying the name of Byju's on the IPL logo. So sponsorship service is being provided by BCCI to Byju's. The person liable to pay tax is the body corporate or partnership firm. which is Byju's. Similarly, let us say a chartered accountant's firm has sponsored the IPL. In that case, the person liable to pay tax is the chartered accountant's firm. If an individual chartered accountant sponsored the IPL, the person liable to pay tax is BCCI itself, because he is an individual and it is not covered under the RCM. Understood? So now, supply of service by central government, state government, union territory, local authority. So if you look at in the question, any services supplied by the central government, state government, local authority, you think twice, because it mostly will be covered under RCM except for the given exceptions. To a business entity, except renting of immovable property, service by way of Department of Posts, excluding speed post, express parcel post, life insurance, services in relation to an aircraft or vessel within or outside the precincts of port or airport, transport of goods or passengers. Now, any service provided by the central government, state government to a business entity is attracting RCM, except renting. That means, anyway, there is another amendment we'll discuss about renting of immovable property, but services by way of the post office, like speed post, if even the government uses speed post, the person liable to pay tax is the speed post itself, the Department of Posts itself, and not the government department. Speed post, express parcel post, life insurance, service provided by the Department of Posts, person liable to pay tax is the government department, and it does not come under RCM. The person liable to pay tax is the Department of Posts. In case of transportation of goods or passengers, like you see the MMTS rails, the person liable to pay tax is the government itself. You cannot ask a passenger to pay tax. It will be absurd. Air India, you cannot ask the passenger to pay tax. The government has to pay tax in those cases, because these are cases where it is not possible and extremely difficult. However, the exemption is available still to a business entity who is not required to register itself under GST, because its turnover has not crossed the threshold limit. Understood? Now, the sixth point, services supplied by the central government, state government or local authority by way of renting of immovable property to a registered person. Previously, we looked at renting of immovable property, service provided by the government to any business entity is not attracting RCM. But here, it has been amended to say that service of renting of immovable property to the state government, central government, local authority, if provided to a registered person, RCM is getting attracted. So, for renting of immovable property, the government thought it was better to shift the burden to the recipient. So, let us look at seventh point. Supply of service by of transfer of development rights or floor space index by a person for construction of a project by promoter, long-term lease of land. So, let us understand this. Now, I have a big piece of land. I don't have the money to construct apartments on that. So, I enter an agreement with a builder. I'll say that let us build 10 apartments. You take 5, I take 5. I'll give you the land. I'm giving you the right to construct apartments on this. So, that is a service being provided by the landowner to the promoter. Promoter in this case would be the developer. The person liable to pay tax is the developer himself, that is the promoter. So, that is what development rights is. Floor space index is, in one way it is, let us say your house is going off in road widening. The government will say, I will not give you another house, I will give you a right to construct an additional floor on your apartment. Let us say normally only 3 floors are allowed for construction. If you want to put up an additional floor, you have to take the government permission. So, most of the developers sought this government, go for this government permission. But if a person has an FSI, because his house has gone off in road widening, he can sell this to an existing developer and he can construct an additional floor. Instead of going to the government, he can directly purchase this FSI from a person who has it. So, for this also the person liable to pay tax is the developer. Long-term lease of land by a person against consideration in the form of upfront amount or periodic rent for construction of a project by promoter. So for long-term lease of land, for upfront payment or periodic rental payments also, the person liable to pay tax is the promoter, the person who's actually taken the land on lease. He is responsible to pay tax and not the person giving the land on lease. This mostly government gives land on lease in these cases, so the burden is being shifted on to the developer. Eighth point, service supplied by a director of a company or body corporate to a company or body corporate. Any kind of service provided by the director of a body corporate or company to that company. It could be any professional service if the director provides to the company, then RCM would be attracted. If it is non-salary, then if TDS is being deducted under 194J, then please ensure that GST is also paid under RCM. There is no leeway. Some of the advanced rulings have also gone in this favor. So this is one more thing. It is not just for sitting fees. It is for any sort of payment to the director as a professional, not as a salaried employee. Ninth one, insurance agent. I cannot tell you enough that so many people are being harassed by these insurance agents. Even you would be one among them. So if you are clickbaited by an insurance agent and you buy a policy, for the commission he gets from the insurance company, the person liable to pay tax is the insurance company itself. Next, recovery agent. Loan recoveries are very hard to come by these days in this era of corona. So the recovery agent, if he collects something, he'll get a commission from the banking company, financial institution or NBFC. The person liable to pay tax is the banking company, financial institution or NBFC. 11th one, music composer, photographer, artist, if he transfers or permits the use of copyright. So A.R. Rahman or Dabur Ratnani takes mast photos, no? So if he sells that to a production company, then the person liable to pay tax is the music company or producer. But for an author of a book, if he sells his original literary work to some publishing company, he has the option to pay tax on forward charge also. This is an amendment. Previously, this used to be included here. Music composer, author, it was mandatorily required to be paid on RCM. But now, an option is given to the author to pay tax on forward charge, provided he furnishes an annexure to the joint commissioner or commissioner. Once he exercises the option, he'll be bound by it for 1 whole year. He has to continue to exercise this option under forward charge for 1 year. Otherwise, why bother? Put it under RCM. If you do not submit that annexure, you have to pay, the publishing company has to pay under RCM. Now let us look at 13th one, direct selling agents other than body corporates. Who is direct selling agent? He is selling, it could be loans. He will find out who is the competent person to give a loan to. For the loan disbursement that he does, he'll get a commission from the banking company or NBFC. Who is a business facilitator? A business facilitator is also similar to a direct selling agent. What he does is he identifies people to give loans to. He identifies people who I can disperse huge amount of loans, who are credit worthy. For that he gets a certain amount of commission. He himself does not disperse the loan. He just facilitates business. He is nothing but a marketing guy for the banking company. For the commission he gets, the person liable to pay GST is the banking company itself. Agent of business correspondent. Business correspondent is nothing, can do the service of a business facilitator, but he can also act as the bank. He can collect money on behalf of the bank. He can disperse loan on behalf of the bank. He has the powers of the bank also, but a business facilitator does not have the power of the bank. So an agent of the business correspondent provides service to the business correspondent. The person liable to pay tax is the business correspondent. See, these business correspondent license is taken by many microfinance companies, even Bandhan Bank. So this business correspondents have a lot of agents in rural areas. So the commission that comes to the agent from the business correspondent, the person liable to pay tax would be the business correspondent, Bandhan Bank or large microfinance companies. Now let us look at supply of security service by any person other than body corporate to any person located in the taxable territory. That means I am an individual, a sole proprietor providing security services to a registered person. Who is liable to pay tax? The person liable to pay tax is me and not the recipient, because supply of security service by a person other than a body corporate. The person liable to pay tax is the other person, because supply of security services to any person located in the taxable territory, the person liable to pay tax is the recipient, unless and until I am a security service provider who is having the constitution of a company. I am X Security Agency Private Limited. I am providing service to another company. The person liable to pay tax is X Security Private Limited itself, because I am a company. If I am a firm, X Security Services Private Limited, if X Security Services, then the person liable to pay tax is the other company I am providing service to. However, security service supplied to a department of central government, state government, local authority who have taken registration only for the purpose of deduction under 51, a registered person paying tax under compensation scheme, the person liable to pay tax is security service provider itself, because that person has registered so only for the purpose of TDS deduction. Because I don't want a double audit trail, as I already told you. Already the measure is put in place saying that he's deducting tax on the amount that he's paying. So I don't need to doubly burden him by saying that you pay the entire tax and you cut TDS also. There's no point in that. So ultimately, security service provided by an individual to any other person, the recipient is required to pay. Firm to any other person, recipient. The only question you have to ask yourself is the security service provider a company or not? If a company, then the company itself is required to pay tax. If I am not a company, then the recipient is required to pay tax. Simple. 17. This is mostly in relation to IGST. Till now we've looked at the CGST notification. The IGST notification is also ditto all the services till now. If it is an interstate supply, RCM would also be applicable. Apart from that, IGST has mentioned two more additional entries. Services of transportation of goods by vessel by a person located in non-taxable territory from a place outside India to the custom station of clearance in India. The importer is located in the taxable territory. Look, transportation of goods by a vessel by person located, let us say I want to import coffee beans from Malaysia. So I employ a logistics company from Malaysia. He is a person located outside the taxable territory. He is providing service to an importer of coffee beans. So it is for the purpose of transportation up to the custom station of clearance in India. It is clearly covered under this case. So the person liable to pay tax for this import of services, the importer located in taxable. The importer, apart from paying for the goods, IGST on goods, he has to pay tax on RCM also. If you import goods, you will pay tax on CIF basis. That means it includes freight charges also. On that you are paying IGST. Apart from that, you are required to pay again IGST on RCM basis. Double taxation is coming. There is a lot of dispute that is going on. No clear notification has been given by the government. Some advance rulings also are diverse. One says that you don't need to pay tax doubly. Some say that you need to pay tax twice. But it is disputable. definitely. 18th one, supply of service by a person located in non-tax. This is a normal import of service. For import of service, the person liable to pay tax is the importer, the person located in taxable territory other than non-taxable online recipient.